there guys, so today's video is going to be part 2 of ranking all my Colourpop palettes in my entire collection. These are all the palettes that are currently in my Colourpop collection and in my collection in general. These are the palettes that I love reaching for the most. Even though some of these I haven't used in a little while, if I can only keep 10 palettes from Colourpop, these would be the ones. And what's crazy is that most of them are not collab palettes except for the top 2, of course. But most of the other palettes that I'm going to be talking about are actually ones that you can still currently get. Well, some of them actually, I don't know if some of them you can get anymore, but I know the 2 that I'm going to talk about right now you can get. So these are my top 10 favorite palettes from Colourpop, the creme de la creme, the ones that I love reaching for. And I'm wearing the top 2 combined on my eyes today, so let's see if you guys can guess which ones I am wearing. I think you guys will be able to guess. My top 3 have been ranked number 1 for 3 years now. I think number 1 was ranked number 1 in 2019. Number 2 was ranked number 1 in my palettes this year, and number 3 was my number 1 Colourpop palette last year in 2021 when I did my full countdown of Colourpop palettes that I had tried in 2021. So those are your hints. Let's see if you guys can guess before I get to them. So number 10, I have a couple of 12 pans to talk about. So number 10 was a new favorite to me that I tried last summer, and I absolutely fell in love with this palette, and that is the In the Springs palette. Now, I cannot believe how much this one crawled up my list. I think this is one of the newest ones that I am ranking in my Colourpop top 10 because I did do a ranking of all my favorite Colourpop palettes last year, so you guys can check that out. But I always like to update you guys on what my new current favorites are. That's why I always do a ranking every year, just to show you guys which ones are my favorites. But I fell in love with this palette, you guys. It was just such an easy palette to use. It's such an easy palette to create looks because there's not too many crazy shades in here. I love the combination of the warmth and the blue. That was really like my favorite combo to use last year, was a warm tone crease look with a pop of blue. It was just so gorgeous for the summertime. That was really like my go-to look for the summer. But like the mattes in here just blend so well, and the shimmers are just beautiful as well. I love how sparkly and beautiful they are. I really was into a super sparkly shimmer last year. Like that really was my preference. And these 2 shades and this shade here, even this shade, were so beautiful on the lids. And then the deepening mattes are really beautiful on the bottom. I love like this tealy color. I love this neon orange, and I love like this sparkly warm red. The only thing that I would change in this palette is that I would replace this pale blue with like more of like a bluish turquoise kind of shade. Like not exactly this color, but something a little bit deeper, like almost a variation of this color. And then this palette would have been like perfect to me, but this shade works really well as a base crease shade, or you can use this one in your crease. And this is a really good blending out shade. I'm not really the type of person that does that. Like I just put on the matte shades, and pretty much if the matte performs the way that I want it to, it'll just blend out itself pretty much. I mean, I didn't do the best blending job today on the crease. I think I blended my eyeshadow better yesterday, but I still really love how this look turned out. But anyway, this is a gorgeous palette. I love it. I really love the shimmers in here. My favorite shade is Hot Tub, but the one I'm going to swatch for you guys today is Prick Me, and this one is a stunning Super Shock shadow, and this is like just such a sparkly, gorgeous shade. You guys know I love these kind of shades, but this one just literally is so sparkly and gorgeous on the lid. I freaking love it. So yeah, I really love this palette, and I cannot wait to dip into this palette again in the summertime, because this is much more of like a spring summer palette to me. I have not used it yet this year. I haven't used it since the summertime, but this was definitely my top favorite summer palette last year, and I think it's going to be my favorite this year too. So I love it. This palette's amazing. So this one was definitely going to go into my top 10. After I tried this palette, it's really funny that most of these palettes, again, that I'm talking about, were all palettes that I wasn't sure I was going to get, except for the top two. All these other palettes I would have not had in my collection if I didn't convince myself to buy them, but also a lot of people were talking about how good they were, including this one. So that one is number 10. That one, Andrea Mattiliano really got me into getting, because she would talk about it as a summer favorite like all the time. Okay, number 9 is, again, a palette that honestly surprised me so much, how much I ended up loving this palette. And this is probably the most neutral tone palette in the top 10 that I would say is a really good. This has ended up becoming my favorite like neutral palette from Colourpop, because my other two, which are Nude Mood and Going Coconuts, and again, I don't really have that many like super focused neutral palettes from Colourpop. They either have like a mix of warm tones and deeper vibrant shades, or they have like a mix of color. Like, I really love the palettes from Colourpop that have that mix of warmth and a pop of color. Those really end up being my favorites from Colourpop. So number 9 is the Plush Like Me palette. I know, but I really had to rank this one high because it wasn't like only one of my most used palettes last year, but it also literally landed in the same spot in my ranking for last year with ranking all my palettes. But I also really surprised myself that it was one of my most used palettes last year. I mean, this was like, I think the first new palette to me last year. I tried it like literally the second or third day of January because I didn't have enough time to try it in 2021 because I received it like literally at the tail end of December. So I wasn't really able to include it in my ranking of all my Colourpop palettes in 2021, but it ranked high in my ranking for last year in 2022. I don't really have to repeat myself about this palette too much. It's just beautiful. I love how grungy these mattes are, and I love how they literally look like velvety on the eyes. They're super pigmented, very easy to work with, and these shimmers are so gorgeous and beautiful on the lids. Really, really love this palette. I love the variation of burgundy shades to like olivey shades, and then you have these lighter toned matte shades. Again, when I saw this on the website, I was like, that is so boring. And then when I got this in person, I'm like, this palette really has a lot of versatility in it. You can do warm looks, you can do grungy looks, you can do burgundy looks, you can do olivey tone looks. It's just gorgeous. I really do love this palette. So today I'm going to swatch TLC for you guys because I did swatch some of my favorite shades in my ranking video and in my most used palettes of 2022. But this shade is really gorgeous as well. I'm not going to swatch like all my favorite shades today. I mean, I am swatching like my other favorites, but if you guys really want to see my top favorite shade in each palette, then you can check out the most used video as well as my rankings video. So this one is TLC, and it's like a really gorgeous brownish rusty green. Like, you don't really see the olivey tone as much when you swatch it, but when you put it on your lids, it's really beautiful. So yeah, love this palette. I cannot believe how much I used this. The brow bone highlight is also really, really nice. I find that I don't have to reach into any other palette when I use this palette. I can just use this one and be done. And the reason why I really got talked into keeping this, because I was going to give this away on my channel, but then curiosity got me and I tried it and I was like, I really would have regretted giving this one away. And I believe this one is still available, and so is the In the Springs palette if you guys wanted to try either of them. Actually, I don't know if the In the Springs palette's available anymore, but I know that this one is. So I'm sorry if some of these are discontinued, but most of the ones that I'm talking about are still available. But yeah, this palette really was the one that surprised me the most on how much I ended up actually loving this palette. Oh my god, why can't I close this? It's really amazing, and the outer packaging is also speaks to my 90s soul. So that one is number 9. Okay, number 8 is a 9-pan palette, and this is the first one in my top 10. This has been one of my favorites for a long time. It came out in 2021, I believe, and it was one of the first palettes that I tried in 2021. Actually, I think it came out fall of 2020. Sorry, my boyfriend's texting me. Okay, so number 8 is the Ornate palette, and this one, again, I wasn't sure if I was going to add to my collection, and then I saw so many people end up falling in love with this collection that curiosity got me, and I was like, I have to try these palettes for myself, and this was the one that really spoke to me because, of course, it has the warm tones in here, and you guys know how much I love my warm tone mattes. I love like these reddish orange shades. I love like these deeper reds and browns. And I love like the black. I love, again, that you get so much deepening options in here in just a 9-pan. And I find that those are my favorite types of 9-pans from Colourpop is when they really offer a array of mattes over shimmers, but 3 shimmers seems to be my sweet spot of the ones that I love from Colourpop. If it has 3 shimmers or more in a 9-pan, even though I get overwhelmed with shimmers, I still like having shimmer options in my palette. So really love the yellow, the salmon-y orange, the red. It's just such a beautiful palette. Every time I wear this palette, I always get compliments because it's just such a richly pigmented palette, and every time I use it, it's such a breeze to work with. And I've done so many different looks with this with just being a 9-pan. So I love this palette. One of my favorite shades is Bohème. I can't remember if I swatched this in another video, but I'm just going to swatch it again. But it's definitely been one of my favorites for a while, and that is the shade Bohème. So yeah, that one is number 8. I don't really have much else to say about it. It's a stunning palette. This was one of the best collections they ever came out with, and it's unfortunate that it was discontinued. But I think it was like a year that this was available, so you definitely could get it for a while, and the packaging is insanely beautiful on it. So that one is number 8. Okay, number 7, again, was a palette that I would have not tried if I didn't get it for free in an order. Because I really didn't think I was going to use this palette as much as I did last year, but this was definitely one of my most used palettes in 2021 as well, and that one is number 7, which is the Limoncello palette. I cannot believe how high this one is ranking, but I understand why, because it is absolutely stunning. I mean, I love the packaging. First off, the packaging is some of my favorite from Colourpop. I mean, the packaging is gorgeous. It looks like wallpaper. The same thing with the Plush Like Me. They could kind of be like wallpaper in a house. I don't know. That would be gorgeous in like a bathroom or something. Random, I know, but this color story is just so gorgeous and lovely, and this was one of my favorite spring palettes for 2022. Did I say 2021? It was one of my most used palettes in 2022. Sorry if I said 2021. These shimmers are just so wet looking and gorgeous on the eyes, and the mattes, again, are so easy to work with. I've said this like a million times, though, that once you cover this shade and the yellow, it's pretty much a neutral tone palette. Like, this would be a really beautiful 9-pan palette, but adding the pop of blue really does change up how many different looks you could do with this palette. I use this palette so much. I loved doing like a yellow crease with this shade on the lid and then this blue on the lower lash line. It would be so gorgeous. It was one of my favorite spring and summer looks to do. I reached for this palette constantly. It's just freaking stunning, and I cannot wait to use it more again in the spring and summer this year. It's definitely going to be one of my most used again, and I just love it. I just think that the formula in these bigger pan, 12-pan palettes become some of my favorite palettes from Colourpop. There's just something about the formula of these that really are stunning. I'm going to swatch Easy Peasy. Again, I can't remember if I swatched this shade or not in another video, but it's just so ridiculously stunning. This one's really beautiful on the eyes because it's kind of like a duochrome shade, but it's like definitely a lot shiftier and more shiny on the lids when you apply it. I love this palette, and honestly, if it wasn't for makeup just for fun, and I forget who else really talked about this palette. I think it was Batty Bean. If they didn't convince me to try this, I was going to try this anyway because it came free with another order, but I would have never tried it if it didn't come free with an order because I didn't think I really needed it. But this palette is stunning. So I have nothing else to say about it. I might bring this palette along with the In the Springs palette when I go to California this summer because I think that these are both beautiful West Coast kind of palettes to bring with me. So that one is number 7. Okay. Number 6 is a collab palette, but this one, I cannot believe how much this one blew me away when I got it in the end of 2021, and this is their first Christmas palette that they came out with, and they absolutely killed it with this. And I heard the Muppets palette was just as good quality as this one. I mean, they really kill it with the Christmas palettes. And number 6 is the Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer palette. You guys, if you need a good basic Christmas palette, I mean, this one, unfortunately, I don't think is available anymore. I also don't think the Limoncello one is anymore. But this palette really was a stunner. It's such an easy palette to work with. I love like the burgundy reds down here and this really, really shiny, beautiful red shimmer. And this green frosty shade is gorgeous. And I love this green matte. I just love the array of neutral mattes in here. They really are beautiful, but the shimmers are so blinding and stunning on the lids. This was such an easy palette to work with, and I absolutely loved wearing this for Christmas in 2021. This was definitely my most used Christmas palette last year. My most used one, in 2021. In 2022, it was the Owen & Zai Christmas palette because that one was stunning. But this one is beautiful. I love that we get a cool tone row and more of these warm tones and then these toasty browns on the bottom, and then these greens and reds. I think that they killed it with this color story, and these metallics are insanely gorgeous. I'm going to swatch the green because this one is stunning. I didn't get to wear this one this Christmas season, and I was pretty upset about it because I really wanted to wear it again, but I just did not have the time. I wore the Blend Bunny green over this one, but this one's a gorgeous frosty green shade. So, again, absolutely love this palette, and it kind of blew me away on how much I ended up really loving this palette, but I was hearing amazing reviews about it, and again, I wasn't sure I was going to get it, but I'm so glad that I did because this became one of my favorite Christmas palettes in my entire collection. So that one is number 6. Okay, let's get into my top 5 favorite palettes from Colourpop. If you guys can guess, leave it in the comments below. So number 5 is a 9 pan, and that one is the Wine and Only palette. And again, I was not going to keep this palette in my collection. I ordered this palette for subscribers so I could give it away. But then again, I could not stop eyeing it, and curiosity got me. And I ended up trying it like 2 days later, and I am so happy that I did because this became one of my favorite palettes ever from them. I love these deep, dark tones of red and pink and brown. They are so rich and pigmented on the eyes, and the lid shades are beautiful as well. Not the most metallic shades from Colourpop, but they are stunning when you put them on. I love this deep, shiny, shimmery red. I love this like kind of Prosecco-y kind of shade of pinky gold almost, and then this like really beautiful pinky shimmer, and then this deep brown. It's just a phenomenal palette. I'm getting like I'm trying to get out of here soon, so I'm trying to remember everything I want to say. The mattes are so rich and beautiful on the eyes. This palette is amazing, and I believe this palette is still available. I'm just gonna swatch the center shade. Again, I can't remember if I've swatched this one or not in another video, but this one is my favorite shade in the palette, and that one is such a gorgeous shimmery red. So yeah, love this palette. It's been one of my favorites for a while. I do want to use it more this fall. I was only able to use it once last fall, but this is a palette that I always wear every time I go out to the wineries in the fall with my girlfriends, because we always make a trip to the Long Island wineries because they're so gorgeous and it's so much fun out there. But I always wear this palette because it's called the Wine and Only. Duh. Okay, so that one is number 5. So let me just grab my top 2 because we are getting to the top 2 very soon. I guess I'll just put them in my lap because they're kind of big palettes. Okay, number 4 is another 9 pan. And again, I was not going to get this palette. And then I was so convinced from so many different YouTubers that loved this palette, like the Limoncello palette, that I was like, okay, I need to try this. And number 4 is the Or Kid You Not palette. This is my favorite 9 pan palette from Colourpop. This was also one of my most used palettes in 2022. I am freaking obsessed with this palette. This is the best 9 pan palette they have ever come out with because I love the deep, dark mattes that they put in here. This is also like the closest to like a berry toned purpley pink palette that I have found from any brand. But these mattes are just so rich and deep and beautiful on the eyes. They're like a purpley berry dream. I just absolutely love them. And the shimmers in here I prefer over the ones in the Wine and Only because they're a lot more pigmented and rich and metallic. And this just, I love this palette. I reached for it so much last year and I'm going to continue to use it. I love it so much. I'm going to swatch OMG, but these shimmers are freaking gorgeous and the mattes are amazingly rich and beautiful, just like the Wine and Only one. So that one is the shade Oh My God. I was about to say Or Kid You Not. Sorry if it's a bit messy. It's a little bit flaky in the pan, but they're not crumbly whatsoever. I love this palette. I really just don't know what else to say. If you're looking for a good, rich, deep berry tone palette, I wouldn't look any further than this one. Angelica Nyquist raves about this palette all the time as being the best affordable berry tone palette out there. And Makeup Just for Fun also loves this palette. This is like one of her favorites from Colourpop as well. It's amazing. I love this palette. Okay, number 3 is a 16 pan palette, and I think you guys are going to be able to guess which one this is. Number 3 is the Lust for Dusk palette. I cannot believe that, again, I wasn't going to pick this up, and then I convinced myself to get it. Again, I originally picked it up for a giveaway, and then I was eyeing the one that I picked up for the giveaway so much that I picked up another one for myself, because I did still give this one away, but then I decided to pick it up myself, and then I tried it, and I'm like, how the heck was I not going to get this palette? It's so ridiculously beautiful, you guys. I love the different finishes of shimmer formulas that we get in here. We get some super sparkly ones. We get this beautiful, like, pressed kind of glitter one, but it's like a very sparkly, glittery pressed shimmer. And then, like, these beautiful duochrome shades down here. And then the range of different colored mattes we get in here are so gorgeous, like these oranges, these purpley gray tones, these pinky shades, and then like these mustardy browns. I love this palette. The shimmers in here are so ridiculously sparkly and stunning on the lid, and the mattes are really, really good and very rich and very easy to work with. I love this palette. My favorite shade, well, I'm going to swatch Shaken for you guys. My favorite shade is Quiet Storm, but Shaken is such a sparkly, beautiful shimmer. Look at that. Are you kidding me? This is one of their most underrated palettes, but it is so ridiculously sparkly in person. It's like silvery and pinky sparkles. And this palette is so freaking pretty. So I love this palette. I always recommend this palette, and it was my #1 Colourpop palette in 2021. That says a lot. So I really love this palette, and it's remained one of my top favorites. And again, I would have not tried this palette if it wasn't for curiosity. And I think Angelique Nyquist raved about this palette as well, but it's amazing. I love it. Okay, top two. Number two, it was my favorite palette in 2022, and that is the Back to Hogwarts palette. I know, again, that this palette was reaped in controversy, but you guys, they really did something with the formula of this palette. I absolutely love working with this palette every time I use it, and I can't lie by saying that this wasn't one of my most used palettes in 2022. I used it a ton. I love it. I don't really want to go into it too much because I've talked about it a lot last year or in my Best in Beauty, but just know that the quality of this palette really is what makes this palette so freaking good. The mattes blend amazingly, and the shimmers are so beautiful on the eyes. They really don't look like much in the pan, but when they're on your lids, they are so beautiful. So I don't really have much to say about this palette. I just really, really loved the quality. They really did something with this one, and I really loved it. These two shimmers are so blinding and beautiful. These ones are so sparkly and metallic, and then the deeper ones are really beautiful on the lid as well. And then I just love the range of mattes in here. You have these warm ones and these cooler tones and these greens and these blues. This blue is so rich on the eyes. It's amazing how pigmented it is. These are really, really good shadows from Colourpop, and I love it. I really do love this palette. I did swatch Patronus in my favorites and rankings video. I'm not sure which one I want to rank. I mean, I want to swatch today. I don't know. Let's just do Golden Snitch. I know I already swatched this one, I think, in another video, but it's just like the perfect gold from Colourpop. I think it's my favorite gold they've ever come out with. It's so ridiculously metallic. I love it. So for my eyes today, I'm wearing my number one palette combined with this one. So with this palette, I took Pumpkin Juice to define the crease, and then I took a little bit of Great Hall mixed with another shade from my number one palette in my outer corners. And then I took Butterbeer and put it on the middle of my lid. And then I took a little bit of Invisibility Cloak to just add some more sparkle. And then I added Golden Snitch on my lower lash line along with Mandrake from this palette. And those are all the shades I'm wearing from this palette. And then I also took a bit of Floating Candles over the shade from the other palette to really make it pop, because I really wanted like a sweeped out, very bright inner corner today with a metallic on the lower lash line. And I love how it turned out. I love this palette. It's beautiful. I have nothing else to say other than I think they absolutely freaking killed it with this palette. And it's sad that it was so reaped in controversy because they really did an amazing job with this. So I don't feel bad for J.K. Rowling if people didn't buy this. It's your choice whether or not you want to pick this up. I am not pressuring you to buy this whatsoever. You speak with your wallet, but I'm just saying that the quality was amazing. So, okay. And then number one. This palette has not been dethroned for a long time, and it remains my number one favorite palette from Colourpop. I'm not going to talk about it too much, but I think you guys know which one I'm going to talk about. My nose is running. I'm sorry about that. So number one is So Jaded by Kathleen Lights in Colourpop. She just did her thing with this palette. I know I didn't include Dream Street or the Zodiac palette, and I actually hadn't used this palette in a while. Honestly, the last time I used this palette was for my collabs with the lovely Riri. We have an entire collab series on a birthstone series with this palette, and we would only use this palette in that series. But you guys, this is my favorite Colourpop palette ever. It's just phenomenal, and I will continue to cherish and love this palette. I know that you can't get it anymore, but I would be lying if I didn't say this wasn't my favorite palette from Colourpop ever. They just really did something with this palette. I love the different finishes of shimmers. This was definitely their best 30 pan palette they ever came out with. After they came out with this one, all the other ones honestly did not interest me in the slightest. I think that this was the only 30 pan palette I ever needed from Colourpop. Honestly, this format kind of overwhelms me if I have this many shades, but I have used the heck out of this palette. I've created so many different looks with this palette, and I absolutely love it. I love the greens, the oranges, the blues, the purples, the reds, all the warm tones. I love that you get all these beautiful neutral shades. And you have every shade you could possibly need in this palette, and I love it. So for the rest of the shades that I'm wearing on my eyes today is I'm wearing the shade You're a Gem in my crease. And then I took a little bit of Jasper mixed with that Harry Potter shade on the outer corners. And then I took Sunstone on like the inner part of my lid. And then I took Pearl and put that underneath the Floating Candle shade before I put the other one on top. Because Pearl is such a blinding shimmer. And then I put my Precious on the brow bone. So I did use, I think, only these 4 shades. Yeah, I literally just used those 4 shades. But they still perform amazingly. This palette is still so good, and I love it. And my favorite shade is definitely Peridot, but I'm not Peridot. Because it's not just because this is my birthstone. It's literally like the most gorgeous shimmer. And this was my favorite shimmer from Colourpop for a long time because it's such a gorgeous, like, lime green. It's very similar to the shade Capri in the Limoncello palette, and I'm almost kind of curious to see if it's a dupe, but I've used the heck out of this palette, and I absolutely love it, and it's continued to be my #1 for 3 years now, I think, because I think I got this palette in 2019. Is that when it came out? Or maybe it was, I don't think this came out in 2020. I think they stopped doing collabs with Kathleen in 2019. So yeah, that is it, you guys. Those are all my favorite palettes from Colourpop. Those are my top 10 favorite palettes ever. I hope you guys enjoyed this whole ranking series. Again, what are your favorites from Colourpop? Do you guys even purchase from Colourpop anymore? What are your thoughts? Have you tried any of these, and any of these are your favorites? Are you interested in picking any of these up from the ones that are still available? Let me know. So that is it, you guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please like and subscribe. Follow me on my Instagram at TBW819 and check out my Poshmark at the same handle. I love you guys. Bye.